thing about being an American. There's a right and a wrong. There's freedom, and if we value freedom, then laws that prohibit freedom or discourage freedom, we should be able to identify as bad laws. And if I'm ever on your jury, and you break the law, and the law is definitely broken, and it's a stupid law like smoking a joint, or anything else like prostitution, or having the wrong kind of gun, the barrel's too short, or any of those things that this gentleman would convict you of, and no disrespect, I understand your position, I will never convict somebody of something that I find wrong. I no sooner would do it as a judge. I would never do it as a jury. I don't participate in it as a defense attorney either, and nor should any human being.
Along that line, this is on your side too. Quick explanation for those of us who may not know the fully informed jury instruction, which I think goes along with what you're saying.
Well, there is no fully informed jury instruction. I wish there was.
The concept.
The notion is that the Supreme Court has recognized that there is a power of the jury to nullify the law, which is a well-recognized power even today. The problem is you have no right to be informed of such power, and attorneys like me are specifically discouraged really strongly at the risk of losing your license from even telling the jury about that. So it's true, I have lots of cases where I'd love to stand in front of the jury and say, ladies and gentlemen, it's true, they presented all this evidence that my client's really guilty. But how stupid the law is in this case. You should still let him off. They can let him off. I just can't tell them about that. And to make matters even worse, the deck is stacked against us because in order to get to the jury, you got to raise your hand and swear under oath to never do that.
Yeah.
You swear to absolutely follow the law as the judge gives it to you. Question.
So I'm sorry, but to me it's really, really important.
All right,
so am I correct in thinking that when I try to explain that concept that if somebody's ever on a jury, the judge may sit there and tie your hands up, ignore this, ignore that, blah, 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 and why are you even on the jury? But the truth of the matter is that you're supposed to not only look at the letter of the law, but also the intent of the law.
Okay, this is where I stop short. Because let me tell you why. Because in order to get there, you've got to promise under oath to not do that.
No, but I mean, we on the jury, if we're ever on a jury, we can sit there and say, 11 of you follow the judge's bogus instructions. I'm hanging here on my understanding.
You can be prosecuted for that.
The jury can't be, though, can they?
Yes, they can.
They can.
And there have been some examples of it. So, let me tell you what let me just say this. In a case like that, I would never say that if I made it to the jury that I won't follow the law. But I will take very carefully and evaluate everything the state presents, and I'm under no obligation to find that anything they presented is true.
Okay.
I can weigh the evidence any way I see fit.
A couple of things. First of all, I agree with the concept of civil disobedience if there are unjust laws, and I believe in the right to have a fully informed jury, and if it's bad law, you should have a right to vote against that. Now, one of the two issues that concern me. Number one is I see a lot of law enforcement doing what Sheriff Richard Mack describes as breaking the law in order to enforce the law. So that presents the question, it's a moral question, does the end justify the means?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me my personal opinion about whether the end justifies the means, I think most of the time, no, the end does not justify the means. Would I say never? I'm not a huge fan of bright line rules. I like to look at the circumstances in every case. You know, there could be some times where I might say, the heck with the means, I like the end so much, I'm just going there. But I hope if I'm going to go there, I'm going to go there. In fact, I can say more than I hope. I can promise you. You ever heard Marc Victor did that? You can rest assured that Marc Victor did that because it was in line with his very strict pro-freedom, libertarian, pro-peace kind of principles. Okay? To me, it's impossible. I mean, you could be for freedom and still not be a man of peace. To me, a man of peace is more than a man of freedom. Okay? Because I mean, we could live next door to each other, and I could never trespass on you, never want to trespass, but I could still be a jerk, and I could say things that were annoying to you and stuff like that. And I'm still not a man of peace. So to me, to be a man of peace is something to aspire to even more than a man of freedom. But you cannot be a man of peace without being a man of freedom. And unless you adopt the concept that you would never initiate force against another person, in my book, under the Marc J. Victor rules of whatever, planet Earth, you cannot be a man of peace unless you are first a non-initiator of force. And if you ever heard Mark Victor initiated force against somebody, I hope your first reaction would be, I know that that is not true. People who know me very well, I think, would know. Now that doesn't mean if you initiate force against me, I'm not taking out my 50 and blowing you away. I'm perfectly fine with that. I got a lot of guns in my house. I am not a pacifist, nor do I think anybody should be. But initiating force is something completely different. And to me, those are American types of concepts. And I don't say that just because I sort of throw it out there, but there's a lot written by people like Jefferson and Adams, Sam Adams and John Adams. They wrote a lot of things about self-ownership, and they wrote a lot of things about sort of this being in charge of yourself and rugged individuals. I mean, these were principles that they had and they developed very clearly. And I think if you look a lot about the Declaration of Independence, a lot of that comes out there. And so, to me, if you take what they were saying as that's what it means to be an American, then, I mean, I think, and I don't think there's any question, they would be appalled by a lot of the people running around calling themselves Americans and what they support today. Now, you don't have to be for that. You could say, I just don't like those principles. Okay, fine, we can have a disagreement about those principles, but to me, those are American principles. And it's about freedom. You at least have to be a person of freedom to be a friend of mine, and I prefer that you're a man of peace.
Mark, on an unrelated issue here, but I really want your opinion on this. We hear very often from usually the right wing that America is a Christian nation. Could you please briefly give us your opinion on that statement?
It's so funny you say that to me, because just this morning, an hour before I left my house, I got an email from a quasi-friend of mine, somebody I bought a car from, and I've never met him in person. He's in Georgia, I think. And he sends me an email from time to time because I think he looked at my website and perceived that I'm a freedom guy and he and I must agree on everything. And we have some respect for each other. So he sent me an email last night that I read and I didn't respond to, and it was an example of something that happened in this little town. And if you remind me, I'll get my response in his email. I'll send it to you if you email me. But what happened in this little town apparently was some atheist, he said, saw that the town had a cross up in a public area that was everything was town supported. And he urged the town to take it down, and the town did take it down. And then he saw a cross. The town had something I didn't totally understand, like a town seal or something. And there was a cross in the town seal. And this atheist thought that the town seal with the cross was inappropriate, and then moved to have that changed. But he backed down because what happened was, apparently all the Christians in the town got upset with the atheist, and they decided to put a bunch of crosses on their front yard. And when you go through this town, it's loaded with crosses in these people's front yards. And this email was telling the story and sending it around saying, all Christians need to put the crosses in the front yard. And then it went off to, ACLU terrible and atheist terrible and stuff like that. And that was in essence the, rah-rah, let's go do this stuff. Oh, and there was also a line in there about, we're a Christian nation. It went off specifically and said, you'll see, if I send you the email, the majority of the people in this country are Christian, so why are we putting up with this stuff? I wrote a long response this morning before I left. And what I said was, I don't know why, but I think this is the case, and I see this over and over again. They made no distinction between the notion of the cross being on public property and the crosses being on private property. And so I went on to explain, why would you even want the government intertwined with your religion? That's the kind of thing they do in Muslim countries. They impose their religion on everyone. And I even went and made the point that some Christian friends of mine have agreed with and I've respected over the years. They say to me, Mark, my religion is really sacred to me, and the thought that my sacred religion would be intertwined with the miserable government is atrocious to me. I wouldn't even want that. And I respect that position. I would want nothing sacred to me to be intertwined with the government. So I made that point, but then I also went on about the Constitution and talked about how we've had, separation of church and state has been a firmly established principle in our country. I mean, we've had some overlap, but mostly, generally speaking, we've had more separation between church and state than other places. And I think that served us really, really well over the years. And so I think I gave him some examples and made some arguments about that. And it was sort of a long email back, and I copied everybody he copied on the thing, so I'm sure when I get home there'll be lots of emails, which I probably won't have the time to respond to, and I'll send them to some of my Yahoo friends, and then they'll deal with the conversation from there. But I don't know why some Christians want to so desperately involve the government to sort of legitimize their religious beliefs. They're constantly trying to impose their religious beliefs on other people. And to me, again, I think that is an un-American type of a thing to do. I mean, and it's true, and I'll concede this much, that, you know, when we say, well, what the Founding Fathers wanted, I like American history, and I'm sort of somewhat of a junkie on this stuff, but I think it's wrong to, as I've said a few times this morning, to broad brush any groups, and especially the Founding Fathers. The truth is, you can find lots of different quotes from lots of different Founding Fathers, even some Founding Fathers the same. You can find some things in what Jefferson said that if you were a Christian you would like, and you could find other things in what Jefferson said at other times that if you were a Christian you would not like. And even the same with John Adams. So I don't think that they were all of one mind. I don't think, like most people, they had the same opinions throughout all their entire lives. But I think that there was this notion. I mean, after all, people came here for religious freedom. They had experienced the government intertwining with religion and said, you know what, I guess that's great if that's your particular religion, but if you happen to be a different religion, it's a really bad idea to take a coercive mechanism like the government in religious beliefs and put them together. And this is one of those things that should be so obvious to people. And I don't understand why it's not. I can imagine that if I was a very religious person, I would be much more interested in wanting to persuade my neighbor about the value of my religion and the wonderful things about my religion, to try to get them to adopt my religion, which is perfectly fine, by the way, than sticking it in the government and trying to get the government to constantly be imposing my religion upon them. I don't know why this isn't obvious. And I also pointed out to them that neither the ACLU nor FFRF, which is the Freedom From Religion Foundation, nor any other atheist that I have ever met in my entire life take the position that the Christians could not, should not put Christian religious symbols on their private property. In fact, I even made the point, I'm the first guy in line to protect their right to do so. I mean, some people who know me know that I am not generally very friendly to faith-based beliefs. However, I am also just equally as hostile to any notion that the government would get involved and stop people or prevent people or hinder people from exercising their religious beliefs. My good friend Marc J is Mormon. He's a very religious Mormon guy. We don't agree on his Mormonism. But if the government ever said, we're shutting down the Mormon church, I like to think I'd be the first guy in line saying, this is wrong, I'm suing, I'm pounding the table, I'm ticked off, and I do this on behalf of people who are not Mormon, because I'm an American. Okay? So, to me, that's just my take on it. I would love to hear really from some Christians why it's so important to get the government involved in their religion. I guess I'm going to hear. I don't know.
Where does it say in the Constitution that separation of church and state?
Right in the First Amendment. It says the government shall not make any law respecting the establishment of a religion. It also goes on to say that the government shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. There are two separate clauses in the First Amendment, and they're very clear, and that's exactly how they've been interpreted. And there's a test that comes out of a case called Lemon versus Kurtzman that establishes a three-part test to determine whether or not any particular law by the government advances, hinders, or is too excessively intertwined with religion that it should be prohibited. So there's lots of litigation over it,